Okay.
All right, two more items. And item 5, inform the board that Dewberry did submit 3 grants to the Gulf Environmental Benefit as approved by the board. The dredging of East Point Channel, dredging the 2-mile channel, the development of the Tri-County Artificial Reef for Wacoa, Franklin, and Gulf counties. And I provided the clerk's office copies of those, so you can read them if you'd like to. I do not know a timeline of the review of the projects, but I believe there were hundreds, if not thousands, of projects submitted statewide, so it may be a while before we hear back. Then last item, Commissioner Sanders and I have the pleasure of going to Alligator Point next Saturday, July 9th at 10 a.m. To listen to public input about the possible acquisition of the old KOA for some sort of public use. The state of Florida, and you all may have heard some about this, the NERDA stuff at your consortium or your conference. The state of Florida has additional NERDA money, NERDA funds spent on land acquisition, and one of the projects proposed is the acquisition of the land currently owned by Capital City Bank on Alligator Point. If this project were to be purchased, improvements would be made in a similar manner as to what is being done at Island View. And that is, funds would be used to buy the land, make improvements, and then provide the county with 10 years' worth of maintenance funds. No determinations were made on what improvements would be made on this property, or even if the property is going to be bought. Commissioner Sanders and I are going to go down to an apt-to-organize meeting at 10 a.m. to listen to what the public has to say.
No commitments.
Right. We're going to listen to the public and say, this is a project that the county is in litigation on this project, and so there's all pros and cons, and we're going to try and...
Well, let me just say where this comes from. This, if I can, Mr. Chairman, real quick.
Real fast.
This, don't we love each other? But this comes from a lot of emails, about 50 or 60 emails opposing the project that
That isn't even designed yet. I mean, all
the
these
Trust for Public Lands wants to do. There's not even a plan yet. So I want to go down there. There's no plan nowhere. And DEP called me and wanted to set up a meeting with me. I told them what no use to, that I would go down there and listen to what the people said. But one of the things I think, and Alan, you can correct me if I'm right, one of the things that you said would be beneficial if this could happen would be if that part of Tom Roberts Road, eastern part of where the revetment is, ever starts washing out, then we will have access to another part of property that we can still keep the road going. And that's the big thing. And then the other thing is, I don't know how many emails and phone calls a month from the Alligator Point residents complaining about people using the bathroom on the beaches, and that there's not but one public bathroom. And so this is what was being looked at, but there's no plans, no nothing. And it's just like I told DEP, I don't want to have the beach renourishment involved in it. This has nothing to do with it. They're trying to tie the beach renourishment with this. Has nothing to do with it. The people of Alligator Point voted down beach renourishment a number of years ago. So therefore, until the Alligator Point people changes their mind, there will not be no beach renourishment, in my way of thinking. And this is just to listen to what would the people accept down there, or what would they want down there. And I'm gonna tell you, if I lived on a place that had miles of public beach, I doggone sure want a bathroom down there, closer than what Ball Point is. So we're just gonna go down there and listen and see what they want. And it's like I said, no commitment on the county's behalf. I don't know about the state. I don't know about the Trust for Public Land, but I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna listen to the people and what they want. And it's just like I told DEP, if they're unanimously against this, then it's not gonna be a go, and it's gonna be going down. Then when they have a road blowout, I mean, we may not be able to fix what we can, so, because of that. So we'll just have to wait and see.
I have a question, though.
Yes, sir.
I've heard Trust for Public Land, I've heard NERDA, DEP. Where is this coming from exactly?
Well, I'll give you a very short spiel. I'll practice on you all for what I might say Saturday, so this is a practice run. All right, so this project came to the recognition of, well, let me back up. Basically, the state of Florida negotiated with BP for what was called early restoration money. The state of Florida BP gave the state of Florida $100 million as an early effort to get restoring the Gulf of Mexico and restoring the state of Florida's damage from this oil spill. The state of Florida used that money in their various locations to buy land for public benefit. The land ended up going to local governments. The state of Florida, I don't think owned any of it at the end, but they ended up buying some tracts of land and making improvements to properties and turning them over. In the case of Franklin County, we had already bought the Island View campground. And so the state of Florida came along after we had already bought this thing with another grant and said, hey man, we can make it a better project if you'll let us put some NERDA money there. Well, we had no reason not to. It was going to be a better improvement, so we did. Well, once they saw what we were doing there, they did contact me and say, look, you got any other things going on? And I did say, go to Alligator Point. And I had actually a different project on Alligator Point. My project on Alligator Point was to go to the end of Gulf Shore Boulevard, where you have those 7 houses that have no access because the road is in the Gulf of Mexico. I said, go buy those 7 lots. There are 3 houses down there. Buy them out. Get rid of the hole in the donut for the Ballpoint State Park and get rid of that problem so we don't have to build a road and have to maintain a road. Just get rid of those people. Well, I asked Doug Hadaway to go look at it. And I said, if you know, that's my #1 project. I said, there's another piece of land down there, though, that's the old KOA. I said, we're in litigation with the capital city. Go look at that, too. I said, I don't care what you do, but we can solve that litigation. Let's do it. So they went to Alligator Point. They dismissed the 7 lots because there were too many owners, and they weren't interested in trying to negotiate with 7 property owners for, a small acquisition. But Capital City was 7 acres with 1 owner. And so it was much easier to negotiate with them. And so that's really how that project came to raise
See,
at
I
the
didn't know
level.
nothing about it. Alan has the authority to talk to people, and he did what he.
Yeah, I was trying to find solutions to problems that we had in hand. And so the 2 problems that we had, one was Gulf Shore Boulevard, the other one was Alligator Point, was litigation. So I said, yeah, go down and look at it. Well, unbeknownst to me, they did go down and look at it. They thought it was a great idea. TPL had negotiations with DEP and Capital City, things we weren't party to. And then all of a sudden they called me and said, yeah, this looks like a great idea. I'm like, well, man, that rose to the top fast. But it was something that DEP had NERDA money and they need to spend it fast. So they were looking at small acquisitions to finish out what they were trying to do.
Too bad we can't get Gulf Shore Boulevard moving to the top that.
I would have loved it. I'll be honest, that was my #1 project.
Wow. I'm getting lots of emails too.
Yeah.
I know we all are.
Yeah, and I did, the counselor also knows that we try to get other property.
I hate you too.
That there were other sites that have environmental value in the county, we tried to get NERDA to look at. And they had their own scheme, their own grid matrix they were looking at. And so even though we gave them other lands, they only focused on this one.
Anybody else got anything for Alan? Thank you, Alan. We're gonna take a 5-minute break, come back and, do our ordinance.
Okay.
It could start at 11.
Well, we have one at 10:45 on the alcohol regulation ordinance. I
apologize for.
Oh, I missed that one. Oh,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, so that one's at 10:45. Is it
Yeah,
okay,
okay.
Mr. Chairman, if we proceed forward as the board?
Yeah,
would like to
yeah, we'll
proceed?
go ahead.
Okay. Well, the board had directed me to prepare an ordinance extending during what we'll call the tourist season, the time period in which alcohol could be sold in the unincorporated area of the county. The direction was to extend the sales period from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, except for and outside of that tourist season, your current regulation would remain in place. The tourist season is being defined here as the off-peak season would be September the 6th and ending on May 29th each year, and that's when your regular current ordinance would remain in effect with the 12 o'clock cutoff. And then during the peak tourist season for the year, beginning May 30th and ending on September 5th, that's when if you approve this ordinance, the sale of alcohol would be extended from midnight to 1 a.m. Your current ordinance and this proposed ordinance still has a 2 a.m. sales period for certain designated holidays and weekends, and there was no instructions from the board for me to change that schedule, so I have not. I did notice when I was looking at your existing ordinance, which is ordinance 89-14, that there were no penalty provisions for the violation of the ordinance. So I have added in for your consideration the penalty provision for the violation of this new ordinance if you should pass it. And these numbers are not written in stone. I put them out there for your consideration. If you want to do something higher or lower or change it or remove it altogether, that's at the complete discretion of this board. But the proposed penalty for the first violation of this ordinance would be a civil penalty of $1,000 plus court costs. Second violation would be a civil penalty of $2,500 plus court costs. Court costs roughly around $300. The third violation of the ordinance would be prosecuted as a first-degree criminal misdemeanor plus court costs. And then the civil penalties would be divided equally between Franklin County and the clerk of the court, because both the county and the clerk incur administrative expenses in the enforcement of the ordinance. So with that, if the board is ready, I will open this up for public comment, unless the board has any questions for me first.
Anyone have any questions for Michael?
Is there any public comment on the proposed ordinance? There is being no public comment, the board is in a position, you can either adopt the ordinance as submitted, you can adopt the ordinance and amend it as the board sees fit, or you could choose not to adopt the ordinance.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I oppose.
Motion carries. 4-1. All right, we'll take a few minutes. I'll be back at 11. We'll have our first public hearing. The Board of County Commissioners are back in session. We'll start with the public hearings. Litter control.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we are here this morning for you to consider an amendment to your litter control ordinance. I know we've talked about this already 3 or 4 times, so I will go through what I think are some of the major highlights. And essentially, all you're changing in this amended ordinance from your existing ordinance is the method of penalizing violations. Under your current ordinance, the principal method for penalizing individuals who violate the ordinance is through mainly a felony prosecution, and then there's a small window of opportunity for non-commercial haulers to be prosecuted as a misdemeanor offense if they dump, I believe it was less than 15 cubic square feet of dirt or of garbage. Under your current ordinance that's being proposed, Mike, would you? Sorry, is it on the iPad? If you'll remember when we discussed this last in Carabel, the clerk raised, and rightfully so, an issue that there was a range of penalties, monetary civil penalties as opposed to a specific number. And the board's instructions to me were to come up back to you with a specific penalty provision. And so, for example, in this case, the first violation, the person would be guilty of a non-criminal infraction punishable by a fine of $100 plus court costs. Again, costs are roughly $300 per, civil citation. But the $100 penalty I throw out there for your consideration is just a number that in looking at other ordinances, and I decided this is the number I would propose for your consideration. But if the board wanted a higher or lower civil penalty, you have that discretion. Any person who would violate the provisions of this litter ordinance a second time is also guilty of a non-criminal infraction, punishable by a fine of $250 plus court costs. And then the third time, I'm proposing you consider the third time that a person violates this ordinance, that they would then be guilty of a misdemeanor of the second degree. And essentially that's punishable by a imprisonment by up to 60 days and or a $500 penalty plus court costs. And then any person who violates the ordinance a fourth time will be guilty of a misdemeanor of the first degree, which is up to 1 year in jail and or $1,000 fine, as well as court costs. Under this proposed updated ordinance, a person who violates any provision of the ordinance a fifth or subsequent time would be guilty of a felony of the third degree, which is punishable by up to 5 years in jail and a $5,000 fine. I've also added into this ordinance, although it's probably within the discretion of the officer to give people a warning. There was really no mechanism in the ordinance for an officer in the field to give a warning to someone. So I have built into this ordinance the opportunity for the officer, if in their discretion they think a warning is necessary, to give that individual a stated period of time. And I believe what I've put in here is 3 business days for the cleanup and proper disposal in lieu of the issuance of a citation. And if they would clean up and properly dispose, then no citation would be issued. And just so you know, under any of the penalty provisions of this ordinance, the court always has the authority, in addition to all of the other penalties, whether they're monetary or criminal, The ordinance provides, and the court has the inherent discretion to require the cleanup of the litter that is thrown on our right-of-ways. The other issue that came out of our discussion of this ordinance in Carabel was there seemed to be an apparent conflict between this ordinance and another policy that the board had adopted regulating yard trash that people dispose of on their own properties. And I have added into this ordinance a provision that yard trash and yard debris, which is defined as tree trimmings, bushes, leaves, grass clippings, pine straw, and similar yard debris on residential property would be exempted from the provisions of this ordinance. And then I go on further in the ordinance to state that the yard debris and yard trash that is exempted from this ordinance would also have further provisions which would limit the person. Basically, if you would, when you clean your yard, you put your yard trimmings and things in your own yard, not somebody else's yard, and you don't take yard trimmings from some other property and bring it to your property. So the exemption would be limited to residential properties, and then the property of origin would have to retain that yard debris and yard trash. But other than those changes, this is essentially the ordinance that you have in place today. So does the board have any directions to me in terms of the amount of the civil penalties that I've proposed for your consideration? You can either accept, reject, modify, it's at the discretion of the board.
Anyone have any questions for the
I
attorney?
got a question
Yes,
before
sir.
now this just take care of the unincorporated, incorporated, all of it combined?
No, so this is just the unincorporated areas. We do not, unless I get specific directions from the board, I don't try and impose county regulations on municipalities. I mean, you do have some limited authority, believe it or not, to impose regulations on your municipalities, but ordinarily it's been the board's policy not to do that. If you have a question or concern, then you communicate that directly to those municipal governments, and they deal with it as they see fit within their jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay.
Now, this will alleviate some of the problems that we've been having with commercial
If it's
construction
enforced, yes,
companies
sir.
or whatever, throwing it on the right of way. Is that what we're trying to, one thing we're trying to achieve?
Absolutely, it would, but it's like, the speed limit. If it's not enforced, people will continue to speed, so it will become an enforcement matter.
But we've had people sending us pictures of commercial people dumping stuff on the right of ways. You forward that to the sheriff's office and they ought to take care of that.
The sheriff can take care of it, and also, I believe Fonda has at least some of his employees who are authorized to issue citations as well. They've
Okay.
gone through the training, they've received their certification.
Okay.
So the county has some limited ability to enforce, but mainly it is going to be a law enforcement issue.
And this is gonna cut, throwing like, white goods or anything out on the side of the road or anything like that?
That would all be included, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
In the definition section, it does include, let me look and see, yes, the definition of litter, just very broad, but if you would like, I can read that definition to the board, but it does include appliances as being prohibited litter.
All righty, any more questions?
Are there any public comments? Any public comments on the proposed ordinance? Mr. Chairman, there are no public comments.
All right, I'm gonna have to have a motion if y'all wanna go on through with it, or how do y'all wanna do it, or?
I'll move adoption of the ordinance.
I'm sorry, sir.
Second,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a motion and a second on the floor to adopt ordinance. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.